Good evening. This is AWANI Tonight, and I'm Saraya Mia. PM promises no more delay in GE15 once BN is ready. And can we make the rich pay more for fuel? That's coming up. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob has promised that he will not delay calling for the next general election once Barisan Nasional is ready. He told delegates at the BN convention in Kuala Lumpur today.
Kita wajib bekerja keras, bersiap siaga dan bersatu padu dalam menghadapi PRU ke-15 yang akan tiba bila-bila masa dari sekarang. Bagi mengekalkan rentak kemenangan yang telah kita capai mutakhir ini. Bagi menghadapi PRU 15, Barisan Nasional hendaklah bersiap siaga. Saya sebutkan bahawa apabila kita sudah bersiap siaga, saya tidak akan melewatkan walau sesaat pun untuk membubarkan parlimen.
He added that he would discuss with UMNO's top leadership and BN leaders about the election date. This comes just days after he said in an interview with Japan's Nikkei Asia that GE15 would have to be pushed back due to rising cost of living and inflation. Ismail said that to head into GE15, BN must first strive to achieve a first-class work culture that prioritizes teamwork, discipline and loyalty to the party.
BN is aiming to win two-thirds majority in the next general election. However, Pengerang MP Datuk Seri Azalina Osman Said said the coalition must deliver their agenda reform first if it wants to achieve this. She also said forming a coalition government with other political groups could allow BN to gain supermajority control after GE15. Azalina added that the coalition must present a plan that was feasible, unlike Pakatan Harapan during the 2018 election. According to her, the next election will be different from previous ones because the composition of the coalition had changed. BN is aiming for 148 out of 222 parliamentary seats in GE15. She added that on top of a reform agenda, BN must ensure that the anti-hopping law, which should be tabled this July, is passed and enforced before GE15. The government will no longer offer subsidies to chicken breeders in a bid to ease the impact of the rising cost of goods. The new policy will take effect from July 1st.
Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said the subsidy will be given to the people that need assistance instead, particularly those in the B40 group. Putrajaya had offered subsidies of over 720 million ringgit to ensure the price of chicken does not go up. But according to him, many farmers did not take up the offer. Hence, the amount will go directly to the people who he feels needed more. Sabri said further details would be announced later by the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs and the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Industry.
Meanwhile, Malaysia's ban on chicken exports begin today in an effort to deal with shortages and high demand. The government has yet to say how long the export ban on 3.6 million chickens will last, but officials expect supply and prices to normalize within a month. The move is felt most in Singapore, which sources a third of its chicken from Malaysia, affecting smaller local poultry farmers who supply to the island nation. Singapore consumers have been rushing to stock up on fresh chicken ahead of the ban, with local media reporting that shops in some wet markets and supermarkets have been cleared of poultry. Chicken rice sellers in Singapore also said they're forced to hike prices. Some are preparing to sell frozen chicken once their fresh chicken supplies are exhausted, while others may cease operations for a while. Nearly all of Singapore's chicken is imported, 34% from Malaysia, 49% from Brazil, and 12% from the US. The government has been talking about a targeted fuel subsidy to replace the blanket subsidy approach. But there isn't a proper mechanism in place to ensure a successful implementation. Economist Professor Jeffrey Williams suggested a tier pricing system instead. Here's why.
It's really about how much petrol you buy. And the people in the T20 get more of the subsidy because they buy more petrol. So if you're buying a big chunk of petrol, you're pretty sure to be in the T20, right? And if you're buying a small amount, 5 ringgit for your moped, you're pretty sure to be in the B40. So if you had tiered pricing where, let's say, below 10 liters, you pay the subsidized price, above 10 liters to 20, let's say 20, 30 liters, you pay an intermediate price, and then above, let's say 40 or 50 liters, you pay the full price. You're really getting people with big cars and big SUVs and big tanks who put 100 ringgit a time. These guys would actually, these are the rich guys, right? So these guys would actually pay the full price.
According to Jeffrey, the tier pricing mechanism would lessen the total subsidies paid by the government while ensuring those in the B40 group receive the help they need.
The total bill that the government would be paying for subsidies would start to fall, because at the moment, the government is paying, the estimate for the fuel subsidies is about 28, perhaps 30 billion. It's a huge amount of money. And this is one of the big concerns, right? People are saying we don't want to paying this big chunk of money. Although you have to remember that Petronas announced 23 billion in profit only yesterday for the first quarter. So the government is getting revenue as well. But better to use this money on something else, social welfare, rather than using it on petrol. Although having said that, if the government doesn't use the money for subsidies, then you and I have to pay it. Anyone using petrol has to pay it. So it is really just a transfer issue. But what they want to do is to reduce the total amount of the subsidy. Now, they would be reducing the total amount because a big chunk of the petrol sales would be at full price. And these would be paid by the richer people, the people buying larger quantities.
COVID, conflict, and the climate crisis have led to a surge in food prices globally. But has the government's poor planning around food security policies exacerbated the problem locally? Tonight on Consider This, we ask our guests what needs to change. That's coming up right after AWANI Tonight.
Melindungi anda dan seisi keluarga dalam ruang tertutup. Panasonic. Jualan Riang Raya Maxis. Bawa pulang peranti idaman baharu hanya RM50 sebulan dengan Maxis Home Fiber hari ini.
Welcome back. Australia's new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, appointed a record number of women to his cabinet. 10 women, including the first female Muslim, were sworn in as ministers today, surpassing 7 in the previous government, led by Scott Morrison. Anne Ali and Ed Hussick were sworn in as Australia's first Muslim federal ministers in a move that has been hailed as improvement in the representation of politics in the country. Linda Burney became the first woman and only the second Indigenous person to serve as Indigenous Affairs Minister. 2 of the most important ministries are also headed by women, with Penny Wong taking over the Foreign Ministry and Claire O'Neill becoming Minister for Home Affairs. Albanese formed an interim ministry 2 days after the May 21st election, so he could attend a summit in Tokyo. With some votes still to be counted from the election, Albanese's Labour Party has secured enough seats to hold an outright majority in the 150-seat House.
Cherish every day.
Meanwhile, at least 106 people died and 10 still missing from flash floods in Brazil. Heavy rains hit urban towns in the northeastern part of the country for a 6th consecutive day. The National Civil Defense has placed several locations on alert for high possibility of flooding, including its capital, Recife. President Jair Bolsonaro announced an allocation of $210 million to assist victims. This is the fourth major flooding event in 5 months. Experts say climate change contributes to more intense rainfall. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has classified Recife's metropolitan region as one of the world's most vulnerable cities. Frequent flooding also underlines a lack of urban planning in low-income neighborhoods throughout much of Brazil. Over in the West Bank, Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian woman who they claimed was armed with a knife and tried to attack a soldier. The Palestinian Health Ministry identified the woman as 31-year-old Gufran Hamid Warasneh. The incident happened at the Arab refugee camp in the southern West Bank. Israeli military claimed she approached a soldier with a knife in her hand and tried to stab the trooper. Al Jazeera reported that she had started a new job at a radio station 3 days prior to being killed. Women's political participation is a fundamental prerequisite to creating a gender-equal world. Commonwealth Secretary-General Right Honourable Patricia Scotland discusses advancing women participation and leadership in political and public life, and whether Malaysia is doing enough on that front.
That if a country wants to really thrive, it has to invest in its human capacity. And that human capacity is, of course, 50% female. So if we don't have the advantage of women and men working together, we're never really going to be as rich as we should be in order to deliver those sustainable development goals. And we've seen in so many of our countries, the quality of governance changes when you have a joint participation of women and men working together in harmony to deliver great results for people.
The Secretary-General acknowledges Malaysia's effort to be more inclusive, but says there's a lot more to be done to improve women's participation in decision-making process, especially in policy making.
I'm very pleased to see that, of course, in Malaysia, you've gone up from about 10% to 15%, and you've now got 33 MPs. But look at what's happening in Rwanda. Rwanda, where we're going to have the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, 61% of their parliament is female and just over 50% of the cabinet. And what you're seeing is that the countries who are developing quickly are really digging deep and finding that female and male talent and then delivering for their countries.
Patricia said putting up measures to include more women must first begin by asking, where are the women currently?
The most important thing for us to do is to make sure that we're always asking, where are the women? How many times have we gone onto a platform and all of the speakers are male? How many times do we look through the higher echelons of a company or an entity and we don't see a woman's face and we don't hear a woman's voice? So I think we need to start noticing. I had a meeting just the other day, and once again, I was about the only woman around that table. Well, in 2022, that's really not acceptable. And not because we are doing this because it's politically correct, it's because we know that if we don't have women's voices, we only have half of the gender, only one gender is making the decisions in order to satisfy both genders. So we need everybody to be at the table. We are producing, for example, a Sustainable Development Goal 5 implementation toolkit to support governments' delivery of SDG 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment, so they have some very practical, implementable things which have been tried and tested in other countries, and we know they work, and we're sharing it. But that SDG toolkit, it's just as important for us to understand the things that do not work, so we can stop doing those, and we can do that which will nurture our young women. We will give them a sense of empowerment that they can do it, and also having the role models. Because I know when I was growing up, people said, women can't do that. You know, you don't see women doing these roles. Well, thank goodness we now do.
That's all on the show tonight. My name is Saraya Mia. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.